$43. That's all Marilyn had in her bank account when she inherited a house made of garbage. Not a real house, a shack, built entirely from wooden shipping pallets, the kind you see thrown behind warehouses, walls made of trash, a roof that leaked, a floor that sagged. This was her inheritance, her fresh start after losing everything. She'd been living in her car, sleeping in Walmart parking lots, showering at truck stops, and now she owned this. A house literally made of pallets in the middle of nowhere. It was pathetic, it was humiliating, but it was hers. And then one afternoon, while mopping the warped floorboards, she heard it, a sound that shouldn't exist, a hollow echo under her feet, like knocking on a door that opens into nothing. Thump. Marilyn stopped, pressed her foot down again. Thump. Empty. Hollow. There was something underneath this floor, something hidden, something big. 3 hours later, when she finally pried up those floorboards and shone her flashlight into the darkness below, she saw it. A metal briefcase, plastic containers, boxes stacked in a hole carved into the earth beneath her uncle's pallet house. Her hands trembled as she opened the briefcase. Money, stacks and stacks of $100 bills, more money than she'd ever seen in her life. She counted one stack, $10,000, then another, and another. 20 stacks total, $200,000 in the briefcase alone. And that was just the beginning. The humble woman who inherited a house made of pallets was about to discover something underneath worth $10 million. $10 million. Hidden beneath the floor of a shack made of trash. But here's what made her blood run cold. There was a note taped to the briefcase, handwritten, shaky letters. For whoever finds this, I'm sorry. Sorry. Sorry for what? Marilyn climbed down into that hole with shaking hands. She opened the plastic containers. More cash. Thousands and thousands of dollars. And something else, documents, photographs, newspaper clippings yellowed with age. She picked up the first clipping. The headline stopped her heart. Local officer killed in robbery, suspect arrested. And suddenly Marilyn understood. This wasn't just money, this was stolen money, blood money, money connected to a murder, money that her uncle, a man who'd lived in a house made of pallets for 40 years, had been hiding. But why? Why live in poverty while sitting on a fortune? Why build a house from garbage when you have millions hidden underneath? The answer was in the documents, in her uncle's handwritten confession, in the truth that had been buried in that hole for 4 decades. And when Marilyn read it, when she understood what this money really was and what finding it meant, she faced an impossible choice. Take the $10 million, walk away, use it to escape the poverty that had been crushing her, finally have the life she deserved after losing everything, or tell the truth, expose the secret, clear an innocent man's name, and give up the fortune. A humble woman inherited a house made of pallets, but underneath there was something worth $10 million, and what she decided to do with it would either make her rich or make her free. Before I tell you what Marilyn found in those documents, before I reveal the secret her uncle had been hiding for 40 years and the choice she made that shocked everyone, you need to smash that subscribe button and absolutely destroy that like button. Because this story is going to take you on a journey from poverty to an impossible moral choice, and by the end, you're going to ask yourself the same question Marilyn had to answer. If you found $10 million, but keeping it meant burying a terrible truth, what would you do? Be honest in the comments. Because Marilyn was living in her car with $43. She had nothing, and she found everything, and then she had to choose. Now let me tell you how we got here. How a woman with nothing inherited a house made of trash, and how that house of pallets was hiding the biggest secret and the biggest test of character of her life. Before I tell you what Marilyn found under those floorboards, and trust me, this is going to blow your mind, you need to smash that subscribe button and absolutely destroy that like button. Because this story has more twists than you can imagine, and by the end, you're going to be asking yourself the same question Marilyn had to answer. If you found $10 million that didn't belong to you, but taking it meant keeping a terrible secret, what would you do? Tell me in the comments, be honest. because Marilyn made her choice and it changed everything. Now let me tell you how a woman with nothing inherited a house made of garbage and discovered a secret worth millions. 6 weeks earlier, Marilyn had been living in her car. Not because she was irresponsible, not because she was lazy, because life had systematically destroyed every foundation she'd built. Lost her job when the company downsized, lost her apartment when she couldn't make rent, lost her savings paying for her mother's cancer treatments, and then lost her mother anyway. At 47 years old, Marilyn was sleeping in a 2004 Honda Civic in a Walmart parking lot, showering at truck stops, and applying for jobs on her phone at the public library. She had $43 in her bank account, a garbage bag full of clothes in her trunk, and absolutely no idea what she was going to do next. And then she got the letter. It came to her mother's old address, forwarded 3 times before finally reaching the P.O. box Marilyn had set up. Official legal letterhead, Estate of Martin Walsh. Her Uncle Martin, her mother's brother who she'd met maybe twice in her entire life. The lawyer's letter was brief. Martin Walsh passed away 3 months ago. No spouse, no children. You are listed as his sole heir. Please contact our office regarding the property located at 4782 Ridge Road, Asheville, North Carolina. Property. Marilyn had almost laughed. Her Uncle Martin, the family hermit, the weird one nobody talked about, had property. She called the lawyer from the library. A woman with a tired voice explained that yes, Martin had owned 5 acres of land with a dwelling on it. The dwelling was unconventional, the lawyer said carefully, but it's structurally sound according to the county inspection. It's yours if you want it. Otherwise we'll sell it and send you the proceeds after estate fees. How much would the proceeds be? Marilyn had asked. Probably about $800, the lawyer said. The land has value, but the structure, well, you'd have to see it to understand. $800 after fees, maybe $600. That would get her a motel room for 2 weeks, maybe 3 if she was careful. Or she could take the property, have an actual roof over her head, an address, a place to start over. Marilyn took the property. She drove to North Carolina with her last tank of gas and $27 remaining in her account. The GPS took her down a winding rural road, then onto a dirt path barely wide enough for her car, then to a clearing in the woods where Marilyn stared. It was a house, technically, if you used the word house very, very loosely. The entire structure was built from wooden pallets, shipping pallets, the kind you see stacked behind warehouses. Hundreds of them fitted together, nailed and bolted to create walls, a roof, a porch. The gaps between the slats had been filled with tar paper and random pieces of plywood. The roof was corrugated metal sheets, rusted and patched. It looked like something a homeless person would build in the woods, which, Marilyn realized, was probably exactly what it was. Uncle Martin had lived here, in this. For how long? The lawyer had said he'd owned the land for 40 years, 40 years in a house made of pallets. Marilyn sat in her car for 20 minutes crying. This was her inheritance. This was her fresh start. A shack made of garbage in the middle of nowhere. But it was hers, and it was better than her Honda Civic. She got out of the car. The inside was worse than the outside. 1 large room with a wood stove, a cot, a table, and 2 chairs. A small addition in the back held a primitive bathroom, composting toilet, bucket shower, no running water, no electricity, except for a car battery connected to a single light bulb. The floor was made of mismatched boards laid directly on the dirt. The walls were bare pallets with newspaper stuffed in the gaps for insulation. Everything smelled like wood smoke, mildew, and decades of poverty. Marilyn sat on the cot and put her face in her hands. This was rock bottom. This was as low as life could take a person, living in a shed made of trash in the woods. But at least it was a roof. At least it was hers. She spent the first week just surviving, hauling water from a nearby creek, learning to use the wood stove without smoking herself out, patching holes in the roof where rain came through, figuring out which parts of the floor were solid and which would give way if she stepped wrong. The neighbors, an elderly couple who lived a mile down the road, brought her food and advice. They'd known Martin. Strange man, the husband Earl said. Kept to himself, never caused trouble. Lived in that pallet house for as long as we've been here, and that's 35 years. Why did he live like that? Marilyn asked. The lawyer said he owned the land. He could have built a real house. Earl shrugged. Some people choose poverty, or maybe poverty chooses them. Martin never said much, just lived quiet and died quieter. Marilyn wondered about her uncle. What kind of life had he lived? What had driven him to build a house from garbage and live in it for 4 decades? She started cleaning, not because the place could ever be truly clean, but because she needed to do something, needed to feel like she was improving her situation, even marginally. She scrubbed the walls, swept the floor, organized the few possessions Martin had left, some clothes, a few books, a box of old photographs. And that's when she heard it, 3 weeks after moving in. Mopping the floor on a Tuesday afternoon, that hollow sound under her feet. Thump. Marilyn stopped, pressed her foot down again. Thump. Definitely hollow. She got on her hands and knees, examining the floorboards. They were old, mismatched pieces of lumber, laid in no particular pattern, but there, near the center of the room, was a section that looked different. Newer, maybe, or at least more deliberately placed. She found a screwdriver in Martin's toolbox and started prying up the boards. They came up easily, too easily, like they'd been designed to be removed. And underneath, Marilyn's breath caught. There was a space, a hollow chamber dug into the earth, maybe 8 feet by 6 feet, lined with plastic sheeting, and inside that space, boxes, dozens of them, sealed plastic storage containers stacked neatly, and on top of them, a metal briefcase. Marilyn's hands trembled as she pulled up the briefcase. It was heavy, locked, but the key was taped to the top with a piece of paper that said, in shaky handwriting, "For whoever finds this, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Marilyn's heart was pounding now. She used the key, popped the latches, opened the briefcase. Money, stacks and stacks of cash, $100 bills bound in bank wrappers. The briefcase was full of them. Marilyn couldn't breathe. She pulled out one stack. $10,000, the wrapper said. She counted the stacks. 20 of them. $200,000 in cash. Hidden under the floor of a pallet house. Her hands shaking, Marilyn climbed down into the hole. She opened one of the plastic containers. More cash. Stacks and stacks of it. Some in bank wrappers, some loose. Some bills were old, from the 1980s, the 1990s. Some were newer. She opened another container. More money, and something else. Documents, papers, photographs. Marilyn pulled out a photograph. It showed a younger version of Martin, maybe in his 30s, standing next to a man in a police uniform. They had their arms around each other's shoulders, smiling. The photo was dated 1984. There were more photos. Martin and the police officer at a bar, at someone's house, at a Christmas party. Friends, close friends. Marilyn opened a manila envelope. Inside were newspaper clippings, old ones, yellowed and brittle. The headline on the first one made her stomach drop. Local officer killed in convenience store robbery. Suspect arrested. The date, March 15, 1985. Marilyn read the article with growing dread. Officer Robert Chen, 34, had been shot and killed during a robbery at a convenience store on the south side of Asheville. The suspect, identified as Marcus Webb, 22, was arrested fleeing the scene. $18,000 stolen from the store's safe was never recovered. There was a photo of Officer Chen, the same man from Martin's photographs. Marilyn opened another envelope. More clippings, the trial. Marcus Webb convicted, sentenced to life in prison. The money never found. And then another article, dated 6 months later. Convicted killer's family claims innocence. New evidence suggests others involved. Marcus Webb's mother had hired a lawyer, was fighting the conviction. She claimed her son was innocent, that he'd been at her house the night of the murder, that the police had coerced a confession. But without the stolen money or any evidence of other suspects, the appeal was denied. Marilyn's hands were shaking as she continued through the documents. There were more articles spanning years. Marcus Webb's continued claims of innocence, his mother's death in 1994, still believing her son was wrongly convicted, Webb's own death in prison in 2003. And at the bottom of the container, another envelope, this one sealed, written on the outside in Martin's handwriting. The truth. I'm sorry. Marilyn opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a handwritten letter. Martin's confession. My name is Martin Walsh. If you're reading this, I'm dead. I need to tell someone the truth before I die, but I don't have the courage to do it while I'm alive. So I'm writing it down and hoping whoever inherits this place finds it. In March 1985, my best friend Robert Chen was killed. Everyone thinks Marcus Webb killed him during a robbery. That's what I told the police. That's what I testified to in court. That's what sent Marcus Webb to prison for the rest of his life. But Marcus Webb didn't kill Robert, I did. Marilyn's vision blurred. She read on, her whole body numb. Robert and I had been best friends since high school. Brothers, really. When he became a cop, I was so proud. When I lost my job and my wife left me and I started drinking too much, Robert was there. He tried to help me. He loaned me money. He vouched for me. He saved my life more than once. But I kept screwing up, kept drinking, kept making bad decisions. And then, I made the worst decision of my life. I was broke, desperate, drinking. I knew Robert worked security at a convenience store on his nights off. I knew the owner kept a lot of cash in the safe because he didn't trust banks. I knew Robert had the combination. I went there late one night. I was going to ask Robert to help me one more time. Just loan me enough to get back on my feet. That's what I told myself. That's what I wanted to believe. But when I got there, I had a gun. I'd bought it off a guy at the bar earlier that week. For protection, I told myself. I wasn't going to use it. I just wanted to scare Robert into helping me. We argued. I was drunk. Robert refused. Said he couldn't keep enabling me. Said I needed to get help. He reached for his radio to call for backup. I panicked. I thought he was going to arrest me. I thought I'd go to jail. I thought my life was over. I shot him. I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't mean to. But I did. And he died right there looking at me confused. Like he couldn't believe I'd done it. I took the money from the safe. $18,000. I ran. Marcus Webb saw me leaving. He was walking home from his girlfriend's house. Wrong place, wrong time. He saw me with the gun and the money. I told him I'd kill him too if he said anything. I told him I'd kill his mother. He was just a kid. He was scared. He ran. But the police found him. They had a black kid near a crime scene, and they decided he was guilty. They pressured him, scared him, made him doubt his own memory. Eventually, he confessed to something he didn't do because he thought it would be easier than fighting. I should have come forward. I should have told the truth. But I was a coward. I let an innocent kid go to prison for my crime. I kept the money, hid it, lived with the guilt every single day for 40 years. I built this house from pallets because I didn't deserve anything better. I lived in poverty because I didn't deserve comfort. I never spent a single dollar of that money because it was cursed. It was bought with Robert's blood and Marcus's life. I thought about turning myself in 1,000 times. But Robert was dead. Marcus was in prison. What good would it do? So I told myself it was better to just live with it. Better to punish myself quietly than to face what I'd done. But I was wrong. Marcus Webb spent his whole life in prison. His mother died believing he was a murderer. His family was destroyed. And I got to live free even if I lived like this. There's $10 million here. I never spent any of it. I added to it over the years. Money I made, money I saved, all cursed, all blood money. If you found this, do what I couldn't. Tell the truth. Give the money to Marcus Webb's family. Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I destroyed their lives because I was a coward and a drunk and a murderer. Tell them the truth. Martin Walsh. Marilyn sat on the dirt floor of her uncle's pallet house, surrounded by $10 million in stolen money, and wept. Her uncle had killed his best friend, let an innocent man go to prison, lived in self-imposed poverty as penance. And now he'd left her, his niece who had nothing, with a fortune built on tragedy and guilt. What was she supposed to do with this? She spent 3 days barely moving, just sitting in that pallet house, staring at the hole in the floor, at the boxes of money, at her uncle's confession. $10 million. She could take it. Who would know? Martin was dead. Robert Chen was dead. Marcus Webb was dead. Everyone involved was gone. She could take the money, sell the property, disappear to somewhere new, and finally, have the life she deserved. She'd suffered enough, lost enough, struggled enough. Didn't she deserve this? But every time she thought about taking the money, she saw Marcus Webb's face in those old newspaper photos. A young black man, barely more than a kid, terrified and confused, convicted of a crime he didn't commit, spending his entire adult life in prison while the real killer lived free, and his mother, who died still fighting for her son's innocence, who never got to know she was right. Marilyn thought about her own mother, how she died believing Marilyn would be okay, how Marilyn's last promise to her was, "I'll be okay, Mom, I'll make it." Could she make it by keeping a secret this dark? On the fourth day, Marilyn made her decision. She called the number on one of the old newspaper articles. It took 3 transfers and 4 hours of waiting, but she finally reached someone at the Asheville Police Department who could help her. "I need to speak to someone about the Marcus Webb case," she said. "I have evidence that he was innocent." The detective who came to her pallet house 2 days later was skeptical at first. A woman living in a shack made of garbage claiming to have evidence about a 40-year-old case. He probably thought she was crazy. But when Marilyn showed him the confession, the money, the documents, his face went pale. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. This is going to reopen everything." "Good," Marilyn said. "It should have never been closed." The next weeks were a nightmare and a revelation all at once. The first detective who arrived was skeptical. Then his supervisor came. Then someone from the district attorney's office. Then the FBI. Marilyn's pallet house became a crime scene, crawling with investigators photographing, documenting, cataloging every piece of evidence. They took the money, all of it, sealed it as evidence. They took Martin's confession, the photographs, the newspaper clippings, everything, and they questioned Marilyn for hours, for days, making sure she wasn't complicit, making sure this wasn't some elaborate fraud, making sure she was really just an innocent woman who'd stumbled onto her uncle's dark secret. "Why didn't you just keep the money?" one agent asked her, genuinely confused. "You had no legal obligation to report this. The statute of limitations on the theft itself expired decades ago. The only person who could have been prosecuted is dead. You could have walked away with $10 million and no one would have ever known." Marilyn had looked at him with tired eyes. "I would have known." The agent had stared at her for a long moment, then nodded and closed his notebook. "That's the right answer," he'd said quietly. "But you'd be surprised how few people give it." The media descended like locusts. News vans parked on the dirt road leading to her property. Reporters shouted questions. Camera crews filmed her pallet house from every angle, making it look even more pathetic on television. "How does it feel to give up $10 million? They asked. "Did you know your uncle was a murderer?" They asked. "Are you angry you inherited a house made of garbage instead of the money?" They asked. Marilyn stopped answering. What could she say that they would understand? How could she explain that the money felt like poison, that every dollar represented her uncle's guilt, Robert Chen's blood, Marcus Webb's stolen life? But then the story shifted. Someone, she never found out who, leaked details about Marilyn's own situation, that she'd been homeless, that she'd been living in her car, that she'd lost everything caring for her dying mother, that she'd inherited the pallet house with literally $43 to her name. Suddenly the narrative changed. She wasn't just woman finds money. She was homeless woman chooses integrity over $10 million. She was woman with nothing gives up fortune to clear innocent man's name. The media circus intensified, but the tone shifted. Now people were calling her a hero. Now they were saying she was an inspiration. Now they were asking not why did you give it up, but how were you strong enough to give it up? Marilyn didn't feel like a hero. She felt exhausted. She felt overwhelmed. And she felt something else, a crushing sense of responsibility for Marcus Webb's family. They didn't know yet. The investigation was ongoing, but soon they would find out that their brother, their son, their father, had been innocent all along. That he died in prison for a crime he didn't commit. That the real killer had lived free for 40 years. How do you tell someone that? How do you deliver that news? How do you give them justice and heartbreak in the same breath? The answer came 3 weeks later, when the investigation concluded. The FBI's forensic accountants had traced the money. Martin's confession checked out against every piece of evidence. Robert Chen's case was officially reopened. Marcus Webb's conviction was reviewed by the state's Conviction Integrity Unit, and on a grey Tuesday morning in November, the district attorney held a press conference. Today, we are officially exonerating Marcus Webb, who was wrongfully convicted of the murder of Officer Robert Chen in 1985. New evidence, specifically a confession from the actual perpetrator, proves conclusively that Mr. Webb was innocent. We deeply regret this miscarriage of justice. We are working with Mr. Webb's family to provide whatever compensation and closure we can offer at this late date. Marilyn watched the press conference on her phone, sitting in her pallet house, and cried. Not tears of relief or satisfaction, tears of grief for Marcus, for his mother who died believing her son was a murderer, for his family who'd carried that shame for decades, for all the years stolen, all the damage done. Marcus Webb was posthumously exonerated, but he was still dead. Exoneration didn't bring him back, didn't give him the life he should have had, didn't undo 40 years of injustice. It just cleared his name, and sometimes, Marilyn was learning, that was all you could do. Clear the name, tell the truth, try to make right what could never truly be made right. She met Marcus's family 2 weeks later. The meeting was arranged by the district attorney's office, neutral ground at a conference room downtown. Marilyn was terrified. What do you say to people whose lives were destroyed by your family member? How do you apologize for something you didn't do, but are connected to? Marcus's younger sister, Denise, arrived with her children and grandchildren, 3 generations of a family that had lived under the shadow of a murder conviction. Denise was 63, her hair gray, her face lined with decades of pain and struggle. They sat across a conference table from each other, awkward, tense. The lawyers and officials quietly left the room, giving them privacy. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Denise said, "My brother was 22 years old when they arrested him. He was a good kid, worked at the auto shop, helped my mama with bills, never been in trouble in his life. And then one night he's walking home from his girlfriend's house and his whole life ended." Marilyn's throat closed. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "They pressured him," Denise continued, her voice steady but filled with old anger. "Kept him in that room for hours, told him they had witnesses, told him they had evidence, told him he might as well confess because he was going down anyway. He was scared. He was just a kid. Eventually he signed something he didn't even understand, thinking it would help him, thinking the truth would come out. But it didn't," one of Denise's sons added bitterly. "The truth didn't come out for 40 years. Marilyn finally found her voice. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything. I know sorry doesn't bring him back or give you those years. But I'm sorry for what my uncle did. I'm sorry he was a coward. I'm sorry he let your brother take the fall. I'm sorry for all of it." Denise studied her for a long moment. Then she said something Marilyn didn't expect. "Tell me about finding the money. Tell me about making the choice to turn it in." So Marilyn told her everything. About living in her car, about inheriting the pallet house, about finding the hollow space under the floor, about opening the briefcase and seeing $10 million, about 3 days of sitting there, staring at the money, knowing she could just take it and no one would ever know. "I thought about keeping it," Marilyn admitted. "I'm not going to lie and say I didn't. I thought about all the things I could do with it, all the problems it would solve. I thought about how hard my life had been and how much I deserved a break." "Why didn't you?" Denise asked quietly. Marilyn met her eyes. "Because every time I thought about taking it, I imagined my mother. She died believing I'd be okay, that I'd make it, that she raised someone with integrity, and I thought, if I keep this money, if I let your brother's name stay destroyed so I can be comfortable, what does that make me? It makes me my uncle. It makes me a coward who chooses comfort over truth, and I couldn't do that to my mother's memory or to myself." Denise's eyes filled with tears. "You had nothing. You were homeless. You could have taken that money and built a whole new life." "I know," Marilyn said, "but I wouldn't have been able to live in it, not really, because I would have known what it cost." Denise reached across the table and took Marilyn's hand. She held it tightly, tears streaming down her face. "My brother died in prison," she said. "He died believing no one would ever know he was innocent. He died thinking history would remember him as a killer. But because of you, because you chose truth over comfort, his name is cleared. His grandchildren won't grow up ashamed of him. His memory is restored. You gave us that. You didn't have to, but you did." They sat there crying together, two women connected by tragedy and choice, by a murder committed 40 years ago and a decision made 3 weeks ago, by blood money and blood guilt, and the complicated paths towards something resembling justice. The legal process that followed took months. The $10 million was catalogued, its origins traced as much as possible. Some of it was the original $18,000 from the robbery. Some of it was money Martin had earned and saved over the decades. All of it was tainted in his eyes, apparently, because he'd never spent a penny of any of it. The courts had to decide what to do with it. The original robbery victim's convenience store had closed in 1992, the owner deceased. Martin had no other heirs besides Marilyn, and she'd formally refused the inheritance. Marcus Webb's family had a claim for wrongful imprisonment. In the end, most of the money went to the Webb family as restitution. The state of North Carolina added a substantial settlement for wrongful conviction, one of the largest in state history. The Webb family, who'd lived in poverty for generations, suddenly had resources they'd never imagined, and they wanted to share it with Marilyn. "You don't understand," Denise had told her. "You gave up your inheritance for my brother. You gave up your chance to escape poverty. You chose truth. We can't let you walk away with nothing." But Marilyn refused. "It's not my money. It never was. Your family suffered for 40 years because of what my uncle did. This money, all of it, belongs to you. I don't want any of it. I just want Marcus's name cleared. That's all I wanted from the beginning." The Webb family was persistent, though. When Marilyn refused cash, they found other ways. They hired her as director of the Marcus Webb Foundation, a non-profit they established to help families of the wrongfully convicted. They paid her a generous salary, insisted she move out of the Pallet house, helped her find an apartment in town, and the world, it turned out, was watching. Marilyn's story had touched something deep in people, a hunger for integrity in a world that often seemed devoid of it. The GoFundMe raised nearly $500,000. Publishing houses bid on her book rights. Documentary filmmakers, podcasters, journalists all wanted to tell her story. Marilyn accepted some opportunities and declined others. She wrote the book with a ghostwriter, but insisted that a portion of proceeds go to organizations helping the wrongfully convicted. She did the documentary, but only because they agreed to focus on Marcus's story as much as hers. She gave speeches, but mostly to college students and community groups, not corporate events offering large fees. "I'm not trying to profit from this," she told one persistent speakers bureau. "I'm trying to tell a story about choices, about integrity, about what we do when no one's watching." A year after finding the money, Marilyn stood in front of a university auditorium, telling her story to 300 students. She talked about living in her car, about the Pallet house, about the hollow sound under her feet, about opening the briefcase and seeing $10 million. "You could have kept it," one student said during the Q&A. "The person who committed the crime was dead. The victim was dead. The man wrongfully convicted was dead. Keeping the money wouldn't have hurt anyone alive." It was the question everyone wanted to ask, but phrased most honestly. Marilyn appreciated that. "You're right," she said. "Keeping the money wouldn't have hurt anyone alive, but it would have hurt me. Not physically, not financially, obviously, but it would have hurt the part of me that matters most, my sense of who I am, my integrity, my ability to look at myself in the mirror and know I did the right thing." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "When I found that money, I was at the lowest point of my life. I had nothing, and I mean nothing, $43 and a house made of garbage. Taking that money would have solved every problem I had, every single one, and I would have been rich, comfortable, set for life, but I would have known. Every time I spent $1 of it, I would have known where it came from. I would have known that Marcus Webb died in prison for a crime he didn't commit, and I stayed silent to keep the money. I would have known that his family lived in shame while I lived in luxury, and that knowledge, that weight, it would have destroyed me. Maybe not right away, but eventually. Because you can't build a good life on a foundation of lies. You can't buy happiness with blood money. You can't purchase peace with someone else's suffering. The students were quiet, absorbing this. Then another hand went up. But what if you'd needed the money for something critical, like a sick child or a life-threatening medical condition? Would you still have turned it in? Marilyn considered this. I think so. I hope so. Because the principle doesn't change based on how desperately you need the money. Truth is truth, right is right, and compromising your integrity, even for a good reason, is still compromise. Would it be harder? Absolutely. Would I understand someone who made a different choice in those circumstances? Probably. But for me, personally, I couldn't have lived with keeping it, no matter what I needed it for. After the talk, students came up to speak with her. Many of them shared their own stories. Families with secrets, money obtained questionably, choices between comfort and truth. Some said she inspired them. Others said she made them realize they'd been making excuses for their own compromises. One young woman, maybe 20 years old, approached her last. My father embezzled money from his company, she said quietly. He got away with it. Never got caught. He paid for my college with it. I found out last year and I've been struggling with what to do. Do I turn him in? Do I give back the money? Do I just live with knowing? Marilyn looked at her with compassion. I can't tell you what to do. Your situation is different from mine. Your father is alive. You'd be actively turning him in. That's much harder than what I did. I just told the truth about someone already dead. But what would you do? The girl pressed. I'd tell the truth, Marilyn said, even if it meant my father went to prison, even if it meant losing my education funding, even if it meant people thought I was a traitor, because the alternative is carrying his guilt for the rest of my life, and that's too heavy a burden. Trust me, I saw what it did to my Uncle Martin. He carried guilt for 40 years and it destroyed him. He lived in a shack alone, punishing himself every day. And it still wasn't enough. Because guilt doesn't work like that. You can't pay off your own conscience with self-punishment. You can only pay it off with truth. The girl nodded, tears in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. I think I know what I have to do now. Watching her walk away, Marilyn thought about Martin, about how different his life could have been if he'd told the truth in 1985. Yes, he would have gone to prison, but Marcus Webb would have been free. Marcus's mother would have known her son was innocent. Marcus himself might have lived long enough to be truly exonerated. And Martin might have found actual redemption instead of self-imposed exile, because that's what Marilyn had learned from this whole experience. Hiding from truth doesn't protect you, it imprisons you. Martin had built himself a prison out of pallets and guilt, and he'd lived in it for 4 decades. He'd punished himself far more harshly than any court could have, but he'd never found peace, never found forgiveness, never found freedom, because freedom doesn't come from hiding, it comes from truth. 2 years after finding the money, Marilyn returned to the property where the pallet house still stood. The county had wanted to demolish it, but she'd convinced them to leave it as a historical marker, a reminder. She walked through the structure one last time. Someone had cleaned it up, made it stable enough for occasional visitors. The hole in the floor where she'd found the money was still there, covered now with a sheet of plexiglass so people could see where history had been hidden. There was a plaque on the outside now, installed by the Marcus Webb Foundation. This structure, built by Martin Walsh from recycled pallets, served as his residence for 40 years. In 2023, his niece, Marilyn Walsh, discovered evidence hidden beneath the floor that exonerated Marcus Webb, who had been wrongfully convicted of murder in 1985. This site stands as a reminder that truth, no matter how long buried, eventually finds its way to light. Marilyn stood in the clearing, looking at that ridiculous pallet house, and she felt something unexpected. Not anger at her uncle, not grief for what could have been, but a strange kind of gratitude, because if Martin hadn't left his confession, Marcus Webb's name would never have been cleared. If Marilyn hadn't inherited this specific property, she would never have found the truth. If she'd inherited something nice, a normal house, a trust fund, literally anything else, none of this would have happened. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. Martin's attempt to punish himself had accidentally created the mechanism for his confession. His decision to live in poverty had preserved the evidence. His death had freed him to tell the truth he couldn't tell in life. And Marilyn, living in her car with $43, had been in exactly the right place at exactly the right time to make the right choice. If she'd been comfortable, would she have moved into a pallet house? If she'd been desperate enough, would she have kept the money? She'd like to think she would have made the same choice regardless, but she'd never know for sure. What she did know was this: 2 years ago, she'd had nothing. Today she had a job she loved, an apartment she could afford, a book that was helping people, and a peace of mind she'd never experienced before. She didn't have $10 million, but she had something better. She had integrity. She had the knowledge that when faced with an impossible choice, she'd chosen truth. She had Marcus Webb's family as unlikely friends. She had a purpose, helping others fight for justice. And she had her mother's voice in her head, proud and clear. That's my girl. You made it. Not the way you expected, but you made it. That evening, Marilyn had dinner with Denise and her family. They did this often now, gathered around a table, sharing food and stories, connected by tragedy, but sustained by something more hopeful, by the choice to move forward, by the decision to transform pain into purpose. Over dinner, Denise's grandson asked, "Miss Marilyn, do you ever regret it, giving up the money?" Every eye at the table turned to her. They'd all asked this question in different ways at different times, and Marilyn's answer was always the same. Never. Not once. Not for a single second. But you could have been rich, the boy persisted, in the way teenagers do. You could have anything you wanted, Marilyn smiled. I have everything I want. I have meaningful work. I have friends. I have a home. I have peace. And I have something no amount of money can buy. I have the knowledge that when it really mattered, when I had every reason and every excuse to do the wrong thing, I chose to do the right thing instead. That's worth more than $10 million. That's worth more than anything. The boy considered this, then nodded slowly. I think I understand. You will, Marilyn said. Someday you'll face your own impossible choice. And when you do, remember this. The hard right is always better than the easy wrong. Always. No matter what it costs you in the moment, choosing integrity will never leave you with regrets. Later that night, alone in her apartment, Marilyn thought about the past 2 years, about the journey from sleeping in her car to this moment, about all the twists and turns, all the choices and consequences. She thought about what her life would look like now if she'd kept the money. Rich, yes. Comfortable, certainly, but carrying a secret. Always wondering if someone would find out, always knowing that her fortune was built on an innocent man's destroyed life, and she knew, with absolute certainty, that she'd made the right choice. The humble woman who inherited a house made of pallets had discovered something underneath worth $10 million. But more importantly, she'd discovered what she was worth. She'd discovered that her integrity couldn't be bought, that her peace of mind wasn't for sale, that who she was mattered more than what she had. And that discovery, that knowledge, that sense of self, that was the real fortune, the one that could never be stolen or lost or devalued, the one that grew richer with every choice aligned with truth. Marcus Webb's name was cleared, his family was compensated, Martin's confession was public record, and Marilyn was free, not rich, but free, and that was worth everything. And Marilyn met them. Marcus's younger sister, Denise, now in her 60s, came to North Carolina with her children and grandchildren. They stood in the clearing outside the Pallet House, the place where the truth had finally been uncovered. The first meeting was arranged carefully by the district attorney's office, neutral territory, a conference room with soft lighting and comfortable chairs, mediators present in case things got heated. Everyone expected anger, accusations, tears. What they got was something more complicated. Denise walked in with her head held high, 3 generations of family behind her. She looked at Marilyn for a long moment, studying her face, searching for something. Then she crossed the room and hugged her. Not a polite hug, a real one, tight and long and full of emotion that neither woman could fully articulate. "Thank you," Denise whispered. "Thank you for telling the truth when you could have just kept the money. Thank you for giving my brother his name back." Marilyn hugged her back, both of them crying now. "I'm sorry it took so long," Marilyn said. "I'm sorry for what my uncle did. I'm sorry for all of it." They sat down then, and Denise told Marilyn about Marcus. Really told her. Not the headlines or the court documents, but the person, the real human being whose life had been stolen. "He was funny," Denise said, her voice thick with old grief and new relief. "People don't know that about him. They just know convicted murderer, or now wrongfully convicted. But he was funny. He did impressions of people, made us laugh all the time. And he was smart, could fix anything mechanical, could figure out how things worked just by looking at them." She pulled out photos. Marcus as a baby, as a teenager, at his high school graduation, working on a car engine, smiling at the camera, grease on his hands and joy on his face. "This is who they took from us," Denise said. "Not a criminal, a son, a brother, my mama's firstborn, a young man with his whole life ahead of him." Marilyn looked at the photos, her heart breaking. This wasn't abstract anymore. This was real, a real person whose life her uncle had destroyed. "After he was convicted," Denise continued, "he wrote us letters from prison, every week for the first few years, always saying the same thing. 'I didn't do it. I swear I didn't do it. Why won't anyone believe me?' And we believed him. My mama believed him until the day she died. But believing isn't enough when the system says you're guilty." She pulled out another photo. Marcus in prison, older now, the light gone from his eyes. This is what prison did to him. He went in a kid. He died an old man at 58, heart attack. The doctor said stress and poor conditions. I say they killed him. Maybe not with a weapon, but they killed him just the same. Marilyn could barely speak. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." "You didn't do it," Denise said firmly. "Your uncle did, and he was a coward for not telling the truth, but you didn't have to tell us. You could have kept that money and we would have never known. My brother would have died a convicted murderer, and we would have just accepted it because that's what we'd been told for 40 years. But you told the truth. You gave him back his name. You let my grandchildren know their uncle wasn't a killer. That matters. That matters more than I can ever explain." The money, all $10 million, was turned over to authorities. After the investigation, after the legal proceedings, most of it went to Marcus Webb's family as restitution. The state of North Carolina added their own compensation for wrongful imprisonment, a record-breaking settlement that acknowledged the magnitude of the injustice. The Webb family suddenly went from poverty to wealth, from shame to vindication, from carrying a family secret of supposed murder to carrying a legacy of injustice overcome, and they wanted to share it with Marilyn. "No," Marilyn said firmly, when Denise first suggested it. "That money is yours. Your family suffered. Your brother died in prison. I just found it. I just told the truth. That's not worth a reward." "You gave up $10 million when you had nothing," Denise argued. "You were living in your car. You could have kept it and changed your life completely. But you chose justice over comfort. You think we can just accept all this money knowing you walked away with nothing?" "I didn't walk away with nothing," Marilyn said. "I walked away with my integrity, with the knowledge that I did the right thing. That's not nothing. That's everything." But the Webb family was persistent. When Marilyn refused direct payment, they found other ways. They established the Marcus Webb Foundation, dedicated to helping families of the wrongfully convicted navigate the legal system, pay for lawyers, fight for justice. And they insisted Marilyn run it. "You understand what this fight means," Denise said. "You made the hardest choice to be on the right side of it. We need you to help others do the same." So Marilyn became the foundation's director, not as charity, but as a calling. She threw herself into the work, connecting families with lawyers, funding investigations into questionable convictions, advocating for policy changes that would make wrongful convictions less likely. And the world noticed. Marilyn's story had already gone viral, But now she was using her platform for something bigger than herself. She spoke at conferences, testified before legislative committees, wrote op-eds about justice system reform. "I'm not a hero," she would always say when people called her that. "I just made one choice, one time, when it mattered." That's not heroism. That's basic human decency. But people disagreed, because in a world where basic human decency seems increasingly rare, where people routinely choose comfort over truth, where integrity is something people talk about but rarely practice, Marilyn's choice stood out. She could have been rich. She chose to be right. And that distinction resonated. The book she wrote, The House of Pallets, A Story of Truth, Sacrifice, and Justice, became a bestseller, not because it was scandalous or sensational, but because it was honest. Marilyn didn't paint herself as a saint. She wrote about the temptation, the 3 days she sat with that money, seriously considering keeping it, the rationalizations she constructed, the very real desire to just take it and run. "I'm not better than anyone else," she wrote in the final chapter. "I just got lucky that when my moment of truth came, I happened to make the right choice. I could have just as easily made the wrong one, and I think that's important for people to understand. We're all capable of both, of choosing integrity or choosing comfort, of doing right or doing wrong. The difference is in the moment of choice, that split second where you decide who you're going to be." The book's proceeds were substantial. Marilyn kept enough to live modestly and donated the rest, half to the Marcus Webb Foundation, half to homeless services in honor of the months she'd spent living in her car. "Money is just a tool," she said in an interview. "It's not good or bad by itself. It's what you do with it that matters." That money Martin hid under his floor was cursed because of how it was obtained and what it represented. But money earned honestly, used purposefully, given generously, that's different. That can actually help people. 3 years after finding the money, Marilyn stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., testifying before a Senate committee about wrongful conviction compensation. She told her story, all of it. The pallet house, the money, the choice, the aftermath. "The question before this committee," she concluded, "is what we owe people when we get it wrong. When the system, our system, built on the idea that it's better to let 10 guilty people go free than to convict one innocent person, fails that fundamental promise." Marcus Webb gave 40 years of his life for a crime he didn't commit. He died in prison. His mother died believing her son was a murderer. What is that worth? What compensation can we possibly offer that makes that right? She paused, looking at the senators arrayed before her. The answer is nothing. Nothing makes it right. Nothing undoes it. But that doesn't mean we do nothing. We owe these families everything we can give, not because it fixes things, but because it acknowledges them. It says, "We were wrong. You suffered. That matters. You matter." The testimony went viral. Within weeks, 3 states had passed enhanced wrongful conviction compensation laws. Within a year, federal legislation was introduced. The Marcus Webb Act, they called it. Not because it would bring Marcus back or undo what happened to him, but because his name would forever be associated with the fight for justice. Denise called Marilyn the day the federal bill was introduced. "My brother's name is going to be part of law," she said, crying and laughing at the same time. "The same system that destroyed him is going to use his name to help others. Because of you. Because you told the truth. Because we all told the truth," Marilyn corrected. "You, me, everyone who fought to clear his name. This isn't my victory, it's all of ours." But late that night, alone in her apartment, Marilyn let herself feel it. The weight of what had happened. The magnitude of the choice she'd made 3 years ago. The ripple effects that were still spreading. One choice, one moment. One decision to tell the truth when she could have stayed silent. And from that, one choice. Marcus Webb's name cleared. His family compensated. A foundation helping others. Laws being changed. Lives being touched. Truth being valued. All because a woman living in her car, inheriting a house made of garbage, finding $10 million hidden underneath, chose integrity over comfort. The humble woman who inherited a house made of pallets discovered something underneath worth $10 million. But she also discovered something worth more, who she was when no one was watching, what she would do when faced with an impossible choice, how much her integrity was worth. And the answer to that last question turned out to be more than $10 million, more than comfort, more than security, more than any amount of money could buy, because integrity isn't something you can purchase. It's something you prove in moments of choice, in decisions that cost you, in actions that define you. Marilyn proved hers, and in doing so, she showed the world that truth still matters, that justice is worth fighting for. That one person's choice can change not just their own life, but the lives of people they've never met, in ways they can't even imagine. So I ask you one final time, what would you do? If you found $10 million hidden under your floor, but taking it meant burying a truth that could free an innocent person's name, what would you choose? Would you rationalize it? Tell yourself everyone involved is dead anyway? That you deserve it after all you've been through? That one person's choice won't really matter? Or would you do what Marilyn did? Tell the truth. Clear the name. Trust that integrity is worth more than comfort. The answer to that question tells you who you are. Not who you want to be, not who you pretend to be, who you actually are when the choice is real and the stakes are high. Marilyn found out who she was. She was someone who would give up everything to do the right thing. She was someone who valued truth over treasure. She was someone whose word meant more than her wealth. What about you? Think about it. Really think about it. And then ask yourself, when your moment comes, and it will come in some form at some time, will you be ready? Will you make the choice you can live with? Will you do the thing that lets you sleep at night? Because that